Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be a quick look at this knife, and this is the Benchmade number 15002 Saddle Mountain Skinner. And so this knife was loaned to me by a friend and training partner at the gym that I teach at, and I didn't use it. So first of all, this is not an in-use, full review. This is just my kind of initial or first impression type thoughts on it. But I really appreciate John loaning this knife for me to check out. I haven't had, I don't think, any Benchmade fixed blades myself. I had a friend, or have a friend, who had another Benchmade hunting fixed blade that he really loved, used hunting a lot. So I have used them before, but I've never actually owned one. And part of that is because I am not a huge fixed blade person. If you follow the channel, you've probably seen that the vast majority of my videos are really on not even just folding knives, but non-locking folding knives like this Jack Wolf Knives Vampire Jack. And then of course I do, reviews of modern folding knives like this. But I just don't carry and use fixed blades all that much. I have them, but not nearly as many as the folding knives. I do hunt and, use a fixed blade when I hunt, but a lot of times I will use a Mora, partly because they're just cheap, they work great, and partly because I live in an area where CWD has been found, so I always get my deer tested and don't like to use the knife until I know that the deer, didn't have CWD. Maybe kind of crazy on my part. I'm sure that no one else who hunts deer in my area does that, but it is what it is. So anyway, I don't use fixed blades all that much, but I appreciate them. And this is a really nice seaming fixed blade. So first of all, as you saw earlier, it does come with a very nice leather sheath. Now this is not going to have the, stitching of a custom handmade sheath. It's not 100% even and things like that, but it's well done. It seems very sturdy. It is well fitted. You can see that it is very much fitted to the knife. It does have a buckle here at the top. Now, one thing I always worry about, particularly being that this is not my knife, with these buckles is that I'm going to cut it when I'm sliding the knife through. So, I always like to try to push with the spine and then open that one up. So that is something that I always worry about. And I don't know that it's really necessary with how much this sheath is fitted. I think it's going to stay in here pretty well without that buckle, but I think a lot of people do like the buckle for the extra security. So it's a nice sheath, and I think that it is a good choice to have this leather sheath on this particular version because it is in the stabilized wood handle. So Benchmade makes some hunting knives in other types of handles, like basically like a rubbery type handle. And those, maybe it would be better to have a Kydex or a thermoform plastic style handle. But I think when you have this really nice looking wood handle, it makes sense to have a nice looking leather sheath also. And generally, I think leather sheaths just usually look better. I do like this wood. Now, it's stabilized wood, which really means that it's layers of wood that are epoxied or some sort of adhesive together and then, machined or ground to the shape. So it's not necessarily 100% a natural wood. The grain is kind of synthetic, is how you could say it, I guess, or man-made. But I think that it looks really good. You can see the contouring on the handle due to those layers, and I think that that looks really nice. And speaking of those contours, I really like how they did the handle. So you can see that there is a palm swell, both from top to bottom and from side to side. But it's not, really emphasized. I think sometimes companies go a little over the top, particularly in bushcraft style knives. They just make them like super thick and round. Not really necessary. You're not going to have hot spots because of the slightly hard corners on the very edges of this knife. When you're actually using it and not just using it for fun, which is what a lot of bushcraft is, when you're actually using a hunting knife, you want to be able to hold on to it well, and this is going to work really well. I have pretty wide hands, but you can see that I can get a full 4-finger grip with no problem at all. And then that my thumb does rest on this jimping. And then you can also choke up, and get your finger on this jimping up here, which is what I know a lot of serious hunters like to be able to do. And even my brother, who is probably the most serious hunter that I know, does guiding and stuff like that, often likes an even smaller knife so that you're able to get your finger all the way to the tip, which you can't really get your finger all the way to the tip on this, I guess, if you were up on the blade itself. But if you're holding onto the handle, you can't really get your finger all the way to the tip. But I think that the handle is really comfortable. Another nice feature is that it is scalloped here. And this is a really common grip, in my opinion, in like actual use of a knife. So I do like that. I think that that's a nice feature. Now, these handles are removable, and that is definitely a good feature if this is a knife that you are going to actually use for hunting. And the reason for that is because you get gunk, like, fat and blood and, whatever other connective tissue and such into the handle. I've cleaned my brother's knives a lot, and a lot of stuff gets in there if you're gutting and skinning and butchering animals. And so for that reason, I don't really agree with these scallops on the back here. I don't really think that that's going to add much in the way of grip or practicality, and it's just going to be, little spots where a whole bunch of gunk is going to stay in if you do use the knife. So I think that this would have been better without those. I think it would have been better for it to just be flush like the other side here. Now for the blade, I think that this is a really great blade shape. I know, again, some serious hunters don't necessarily want or need quite this much tip, quite this acute a tip, but I think for a general use outdoor knife as well as a hunting knife, this is about perfect. It's basically a really traditional drop point. You have a little bit of curve upward and then back down to the spine, a little amount of straight edge here, and then a nice gradual curve on the belly towards the tip. Just a really classic blade shape that's going to work well for everything. Again, I didn't use this knife, but it looks like it's ground well. It's not a super thick looking grind, which is nice, really particularly for skinning, where you want to be able to slice really well. I've had some knives that were made for hunting, made for outdoors, and they came with really stupidly thick edges and grinds, and even some really popular like outdoors hunting, bushcraft, whatever style knives where you basically can't really cut with it. Or you can cut, but it's not going to cut well. So I do like to see an outdoors knife that is ground a little thinner for cutting. You're not going to break this knife. It has a saber grind. It's not ground the whole way to the top, relatively thick stock. If you break this knife, it's kind of on you, So yeah, I think that having a thinner grind is worth the minimal amount of reduction in durability that it has, which is very minimal in my experience. It also does have a sharpening choil. A lot of people really like that. I can go either way on them, but just something to be aware of. I have found in my, not extensive, but my use of hunting knives and gutting and butchering and such, that can kind of catch when you are trying to skin or things like that. So I generally don't really prefer it on something like this, but I think a lot of people do. It might make it easier to sharpen it in the field. So it does have S30V for the blade steel. At this point in the knife game, the enthusiasts might kind of poo-poo S30V, but I certainly don't. I think that S30V is a great blade steel. It's pretty easy to sharpen. You do need a good stone or maybe a diamond stone, but it's not crazy hard to sharpen like some, super steels, and it holds an edge really well. Benchmade definitely knows how to heat treat S30V. It's pretty, stainless. So I have no complaints with S30V. I really like it. And I think that it deserves to still have the good reputation that it did a couple years ago. And again, that's something that's purely from an enthusiast standpoint. I think most normal people or most people who are buying a knife just as a hunter would see S30V and think that's a great steel, and that, in my opinion, is the correct thing to think. Not to hate on enthusiasts, but how much could you tell the difference between S30V and Magna Cut, you know, maybe if you're in salt water all the time or something. But I think overall this is a really nice knife. I do really appreciate getting to check it out, even though, again, I didn't use it. This is just an impressions review, I guess I could call it. And I want to thank John again for letting me check it out. I always love getting to check out knives that I wouldn't necessarily have myself. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all. Check out my website where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.